Nosso Lar. Chapter 40, As you sow, so shall you reap. I couldn't explain why I wanted to visit the women's department of the Chambers of Rectification, but I spoke to Narcissa about it and she agreed to take me there. When the Father summons us to a certain place, she said kindly, there must be some task awaiting us there. Each situation in life has a definite purpose. Don't forget to bear this principle in mind during your apparently casual visits. As long as our thoughts are dedicated to the practice of the good, it's easy to tune in to the divine suggestions that come our way. That very day, the nurse took me with her to look for Nemezia, a prestigious worker in that sector. We found her easily. There were a lot of women who looked more like human wrecks laid out on rows of very white, well-kept beds. Here, painful cries. Over there, agonizing exclamations. Nemezia, who was endowed with Narcissa's benevolence, spoke to me kindly. By now, my friend must be accustomed to such scenes. The situation is nearly the same in the men's department. And making a meaningful gesture to her companion, she said, Narcissa, please feel free to show our brother all the services that you think may be appropriate for his learning experience. Make yourselves at home. My friend and I were commenting on human vanity, always attached to physical pleasures, recalling observations and teachings on the subject when we reached Ward 7. There were dozens of women lying in individual beds spaced evenly apart. I was studying the physiognomy of some of the patients when one of them grabbed my attention. Who was this embittered woman with such a peculiar face? She looked prematurely old, and her lips were contracted so as to portray a mixture of sarcasm and resignation. Her dim and sorrowful eyes seemed to be defective. I began searching my memory and I was dismayed when I finally recalled her from my past. It was Elisa, the same Elisa I had known in my youth. Suffering had changed her, but there was no doubt about it in my mind. I remembered perfectly well the day this humble girl was brought to our house by an old friend of my mother, who accepted her recommendations and hired the girl to be our maid. At first, nothing unusual happened between us as we went about our daily routines. However, we eventually grew excessively intimate, forgetting about who should have been giving the orders and who should have been obeying them. Elisa seemed to be a bit on the wild side, and when we were alone, she unabashedly referred to certain adventures of her adolescence, making the imprudence of our thoughts even more serious. I remembered the day my mother summoned me to give me a piece of good advice. Such intimacy, she said, was not proper. It was reasonable for us to show kindly generosity towards the maid, but it would be better for us to keep our relationship within wise limits. However, I had already crossed the line, and our camaraderie developed into something else. Under enormous moral duress, Elisa finally left our house, lacking the courage to make accusations against me. Time passed, and my memory of the episode reduced the affair to having been a fortuitous incident of human existence. Nonetheless, that incident, like anything else in life, had retained a life of its own, and here was Elisa right in front of me now, defeated and humiliated. What had become of this wretched creature, who so early in life had opened the chapter of suffering? Where had she come from? In this case, I wasn't facing someone like Soveda, to whom both my father and I owed a debt. Now, the debt was entirely mine. I even trembled, ashamed at the disinterment of such memories, and like a child anxious to be forgiven for his mistakes, I turned to Narcissa asking for guidance. I truly admired the trust such saintly women inspired in me. I probably would never have had the courage to ask Minister Clarencio the kinds of explanations that I had asked of Lazias's mother, and my attitude would probably have been different if Tobias had been at my side at this particular moment. I had always regarded this kindly Christian woman as a mother, so I turned to her, trusting her now more than ever. I could tell by the look Narcissa gave me that she seemed to understand everything. I began talking and could barely hold back my tears, but at a certain point of my painful confession, my friend remarked, "You don't need to go on. I can guess the end of your story. Don't indulge in destructive thoughts. I can understand your moral martyrdom from my own personal experience. However, if the Lord has allowed you to meet this sister again at this time, it must be because he thinks you are in a position to repay your debt." Sensing my indecision, she continued, "Don't be afraid. Approach and comfort her. All of us, my brother, encounter the fruits of the good or evil that we have sown along the way. This statement isn't just a doctrinal platitude, it's a universal reality. I have learned a great deal from similar situations. Blessed are the debtors who are in a position to repay." And perceiving my firm resolution to make the necessary adjustment to my account, she added, "Go on, but don't identify yourself for now. Do so only after you have successfully helped her. it won't be hard because of the fact that she is temporarily almost completely blind. By the energies enveloping her, I can identify the sad characteristics of a failed mother and a lost woman. We approached, and I began to speak comfortingly to her. Elisa introduced herself, telling us her name and freely providing other information. She had been brought to the Chambers of Rectification 3 months ago. Willing to punish myself before Narcissa so that the lesson would be indelibly written on my soul, I asked, "What's your story, Elisa? You must have suffered a great deal." Sensing the warm tone of my question, she smiled resignedly and opened up. "Why would I want to remember such sad things? Painful experiences always teach us lessons," I replied. The unhappy woman, who displayed a profound mental transformation, thought for a few minutes as if organizing her ideas, and then spoke. "My experience was that of all reckless women who exchanged the blessed bread of work for the bitter gall of illusion. In the bygone days of my youth as a child of an extremely poor home, I went to work in the home of a wealthy businessman, where life imposed a huge transformation on me. This man had a son who was as young as I was, and we became very intimate. Any reaction on my part would have been useless. Afterwards, I wrongly forgot that God reserves work for all those who love a sane life, no matter how delinquent they have been, and I gave myself up to a series of painful experiences, which I don't need to comment on. I knew pleasure, luxury, and material comfort firsthand. This was followed by self-hatred, syphilis, hospitalization, abandonment, and enormous disillusionment, which culminated in blindness and death. I wandered for a long time in terrible despair, but one day I prayed so much to the Virgin of Nazareth for help that in her name and out of love, some messengers of good rescued me and brought me here to this place of blessed consolation." Deeply moved to tears, I asked, "And him? What's the name of the man who made you so unhappy?" I heard her speak my name and that of my parents. "Do you hate him?" I inquired, distraught. She smiled sadly and answered, "Throughout the suffering of my past, I cursed his memory and fed a mortal hatred for him. But Sister Nemezia has changed me. To hate him, I must hate myself. In my case, the blame must be shared between us. Therefore, I hold no one to blame." Her humility touched me. I took her right hand, and a tear of repentance and remorse fell upon it. "Listen, my friend," I said with strong emotion. "My name is also Andre, and I must help you. From now on, you can count on me." "Your voice," Elisa said unknowingly, "is like his." "Well," I continued, deeply moved, "up to now, I haven't had a family per se in Nosso Lar, but you will be my sister of the heart. You can rely on my devotion as a friend." A big smile seemed like a ray of light on the sufferer's face. "I thank you so much," she said, drying her eyes. "It's been years since anyone has talked to me as if I were family and consoled me with sincere friendship. May Jesus bless you." At that moment, as my tears fell even more abundantly, Narcissa maternally took my hands and repeated, "May Jesus bless you."